Hi, everybody. This is Saad for the Sad Truth. In my 2011 book, The Consuming Instinct, I briefly discuss the field of biomimicry. Some of you may not be familiar with this discipline, so I thought I would briefly describe it before I get on with the main theme of today's clip. So, biomimicry is the idea that we can look to nature for solutions that it has come up with and then try to mimic those solutions synthetically. So if we look, for example, at the gecko's feet, uh, the gecko's feet contain certain adhesive properties that are quite extraordinary. And so material scientists would certainly like to replicate those qualities in developing all sorts of products and applications. Now, of course, as somebody who studies the evolutionary roots of human behavior in general and consumer behavior in particular, I'm very open to studying other species. It is part of the theoretical and epistemological toolbox that I use in trying to understand human behavior. Of course, this is not typically the case for many social scientists, and certainly not to any scientists who are housed in business schools. And it is precisely this openness toward other species that allows me at times to come up with analogies between the behavior of a particular species and some phenomenon within the human context. It is precisely this type of lens that led me to propose an analogy between political correctness and the spider wasp. I recently introduced this idea in my chat with Tommy Robinson, and so I thought that I would spend a bit of time discussing it further here and then linking it to some other biological analogies. Before I do so, I thought that I should also mention two interesting terms that evolutionists use. And so typically when we are comparing two species, we could talk about homologous traits or behaviors or analogous traits and behaviors. So for example, if we look at a particular trait that is similar across two species, that trait is a homologous trait if it points to the fact that those two species share a common ancestor. And so a particular structure in the human arm might be similar to that of some other mammalian species, and that suggests that humans and that other mammalian species shared some common ancestry. So that's known as a homologous trait. An analogous trait is where you have, for example, birds have evolved the capacity for flight, as have bats, but that's not indicative of the fact that they share, that's due to common ancestry. Rather, this is known as convergent evolution. Each of the two species have evolved that capacity independently of one another. And it's important to sort of talk about homologous versus analogous traits, because oftentimes when we use the term analogy, it means something differently when we mention it colloquially versus if we mention it amongst biologically informed individuals. But in any case, going back to the notion of political correctness as analogous to the spider wasp, so let me mention this to those of you who didn't watch my Tommy Robinson clip, which I do hope that you'll take the time to watch. It was a very interesting conversation. Well, I basically argue that if you look at the spider wasp, it's much smaller than the spiders that it ends up stinging, but it finds a way to sting this much larger and ominous looking animal, and that sting renders the spider like a complete zombie. So much so that the wasp, again, which is much smaller than the spider, will take the spider, put it in its burrow, lay some eggs on the spider. The spider is fully alive, but he's in a zombie state. And then as the offspring come to life, they've got this packet of in vivo calories that they could consume. It's quite, grotesque and chilling. Very much what horror movies are made of, but it's a very real, natural behavior in the animal kingdom. Well, the reason why I thought that behavior was so wonderful in explaining political correctness, because political correctness, if you'd like, is the spider wasp's sting, it basically parasitizes human minds, renders them completely inept at using reason and logic and evidence and science, and it causes them to sort of slowly, it causes people who are infected with political correctness to slowly walk to the abyss of darkness in zombie-like states. It's a very, very powerful way of describing what happens to people's minds when they become infected with all sorts of viruses of the mind, right? I mean, they're real cancers of the human mind. Cancer is not in the literal sense, but in the metaphorical sense, and that people's capacities to think are completely shut off. I could think of another apt example of this type of behavior in the animal kingdom. So there's a roundworm that enters or infects animals, I think some ungulates, and infects their brains. I think I'd seen it originally in a documentary, sort of a typical National Geographic documentary, where I think it were wildebeests that had been infected with this roundworm. And when it is at a particular stage, sort of in the natural progression of that infection, then the wildebeest is caught in a endless loop of sort of just walking around in very, very small circles. Its head is down, and it's completely, that's it. I mean, it becomes very much like a utter zombie. And of course, from the perspective of the predator-prey relationship in the African savanna, such a animal, if it's not going to die from the actual infection, it's going to die because it cannot run away from the looming predators, because it literally just puts its head down. It's a very, very sad reality to watch, because it's just completely in a zombie-like state. It just goes around in little circles until it dies one way or another. That's exactly what is happening with the people who are exhibiting infestation with, well, I actually coined the disorder, Ostrich Parasitic Symptom, right, or disorder. You really are infected with a set of memoplexes, regressive memoplexes, that completely shut off your capacity to view the world through the lens of reason, rationality, empirical evidence, logic. So there you have it, folks. We can always turn to our animal cousins to inform us about realities, life and death realities that we are facing in our public discourse. So there you have it. Please share this clip. Make sure to tell your friends about it. Let's spread some good ideas. Let's defeat the bad ones. Cheers.